We welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, brought to you by our friends at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use the box at sign up for 10 points. And here we go.
Hey, welcome guys. Really excited to be back here on Friday night. Last week, due to Christmas, me and Noah were off. Took the time to spend some time with some friends. But yeah, Noah, how are you, man? Really good day of football so far, and we still got one big game left to go, obviously.
Yeah, I'm doing really good, man. How about you?
Really good. Really good game so far. I'll get into it a little bit more. First, I want to touch on some of the games that we've already had so far. And before we go over that Bama-Notre Dame game, let's go ahead and UGA played Cincinnati today, Noah. They got down early. I will say Cincinnati's defense looked like what everybody was saying, that it was good this year. But UGA with a big comeback late in the fourth quarter, another pretty solid performance by JT Daniels, hopefully a guy who you guys are going to have back next season. He'd really be a big spark for that offense. Really like what I see out of him. What were some of your takeaways from that game, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't looking too good at first. I was keeping up with it a little bit because I was out eating for my sister's birthday. But, yeah, I mean, all credit to Cincinnati. I think they've had a great season. I know David is in here. He was talking about this earlier. I think our biggest win of the season is this game right here, and they've had a dream season, but you have to question, have we let our expectations lower a bit? And, he says it right there, the Bearcats. I think this season where we had a lot of potential, I think if, obviously hypotheticals mean nothing, but I think if we had started JT Daniels from week one, we could still be in something right now. Like you mentioned, he had another great game today. He had 392 passing yards. I hope we keep him, obviously, but, I was impressed that we came back. But I would say, the fact we needed a 53-yard game-winning field goal to beat Cincinnati, all credit them. They've had a dream season. But, you'd expect more, I think, from UGA. I think we should be contending for titles right now. I think we should be playing in a game right now, not earlier today. So, yeah, I'm obviously a little bit happy about it. But, it's another year going without a championship, and I think that's what we should be aiming for.
Yeah, most definitely. And, me being a Gators fan in the season that we had, I definitely see where you're coming from there. Obviously, and go ahead and give me some crap in the comments, guys, if you plan on doing it. But we got absolutely decimated by Oklahoma the other night. Honestly, I didn't even watch the game. I fell asleep before it even started because I was so tired. But waking up to that wasn't exactly the greatest feeling in the world. But at the same time, having played Bama to the wire, Noah, and the season that we had, losing to them really didn't hurt. Obviously I was let down, but I feel like the loss to Bama and the loss to LSU hurt a lot more because they were before our season was over and when we still had hopes of college football playoffs. So, I can see where you're coming from there. All credit deserved to Cincinnati. Like you said, great season. But ultimately for both of our teams, that really isn't our ultimate goal every season. We want to be in the playoffs and a game, I want to talk about Auburn and Northwestern too, but, today we saw Notre Dame play Alabama, and I think that both of us could say that, no disrespect to Notre Dame, I was rooting for them, but I feel like both of our teams probably would have played Alabama better than what we saw at Notre Dame today.
No, I definitely agree. I think if both our teams played to potential, and that's the key thing, I think we would give them better game than Notre Dame. And, like we've said many times, great season from Notre Dame. They are a very good team, but, they get to these big games and they struggle. They got blown out by Clemson and they didn't really compete well with Alabama today. Obviously we'll get a little more in depth with that later, but I think you guys are right. I think you're right there that both our teams are aiming for the top right now. I think it's going to be a big fight for our division, but, we've got to go higher than that. Alabama's still running the SEC. Largely, they're consistently in the playoffs. Teams like, Alabama and Clemson, I think there's a standard we're trying to reach. And right now, I think we're both failing to reach that standard. I thought you guys would beat Oklahoma. I know you guys had a lot of starters out, but I think you guys have a very good team. And, I'm not sold on Oklahoma's defense. I thought it'd be a good game. I did not expect them to just go out there and stomp you guys like they did. That was just embarrassing in my opinion. And I think Dan Mullen's got to take a lot of criticism for that. We've had a lot of discussions about him. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. And I think we've seen in the past 2 games they've had in these big games, I think his defense has massively failed. I think you have to look at Todd Grantham there. I think all year he's been inconsistent at best and straight terrible at worst. And I think if Dan Mullen wants to do anything against Florida, bigger than winning the SEC East one season, I think he has to make some tough decisions and probably let him go, evaluate the roster, and see what they need to improve at.
Yeah, and real quickly, continuing with what you just said there, Noah, before we jump over to that Auburn Northwestern game, there already has been some firings out of that Florida Gator staff. Ron English, safeties coach, and the name is, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but our defensive back coach as well have both been let go. No signs coming out of the university. It looks like Todd Grantham will be there yet again for another season. Dan Mullen is very good friends with him, and unfortunately, I feel like that is, that's going to save, at least for now, Grantham's job. They came over to Florida together from Mississippi State. They've been together for 4 or 5 seasons now. Grantham's actually his neighbor, fun fact. But I think unfortunately that's going to save Grantham. I will say that he's always had plays here and there, Noah, where you kind of scratch your head and go, what the hell were you thinking there, Grantham? But up until this season, he really was pretty solid with us. I mean, we had top 10 defenses. The offense just came around, midway through the season last year, and then obviously this season. But, I don't know. I feel like the whole defense needs an overhaul. We have a lot of young guys, especially starting off the season next year. We got to have the right guy there. And I know from you and our guy Josh Lane that, Grantham has a history of being good but not great. And, as you said, we got to have great if we're going to reach the goals that we have, much like, your Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dan Mullen, I get it. If he's friends with Todd Grantham, it's not going to be easy. But I think a championship level coach has to make those bad or those uncomfortable decisions. Sometimes you only have bad choices, but you still have to choose. And I think that he's made a step in firing those coaches that you mentioned there, because I think the secondary, especially Marco Wilson, has really let you guys down this year. But he's got to look at Todd Grantham, man. This is a ruthless business at times. You can't start getting attached to people. And I think that if he's very loyal to Todd Grantham, I think it's probably going to hurt him in the long term, to be honest with you.
Yeah, most definitely. It's kind of, he's putting his job on the line for Todd Grantham right now. Because, we started off the season really good. We just had the one loss to Texas A&M. You finish off the season losing 3 straight. Now you take a look at this whole season and you kind of go, yeah, our offense was great all year, but we actually, in terms of win-loss and winning a New Year's Six bowl game, we actually took a step back. So, there's definitely a lot of question marks this offseason. Unfortunately, I do feel like Todd Grantham will be there for at least one more season. I just have some personnel position coaches change. But, with that said, no, I don't want to spend all night on the Florida Gators. Our season's over with. We got our asses handed to us by Oklahoma, sadly. We got to go out there. We got to recruit, and we got to rebound for next season. It's not going to be easy, especially if JT Daniels returns. Georgia's looking really good heading into next season. But let's go ahead and let's touch on this game, Auburn and Northwestern. Man, Northwestern continues what's been a really solid season for them. I feel like when they played Ohio State in the Big Ten, if they had a little bit of more offensive firepower, they probably would have won that game because their defense, has been great all season. We've talked a lot about it. They played fantastic. They forced turnovers on Fields. Really, they just got killed late in the game by the run game. But they took it to Auburn today. Another not so great performance by Bo Nix. A little bit better than he has been on the season because he didn't really turn over the ball as much. But, man, fantastic performance by them. I have some numbers here real quick. Find them. So senior quarterback Peyton Ramsey, 24 for 35 for 291 yards and 3 touchdowns. Great way to go out for him. and a lot of people were saying Pat Fitzgerald for Coach of the Year. And I know if Mikey's in here, go NW, man. Great season by them.
Yeah, and I definitely would agree with Pat Fitzgerald for Coach of the Year. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's always been a guy who's underrated. And when I look at this game, I'm not a fan of Bo Nix. I thought he had one of his better games: 25 of 42, 292 yards, 1 touchdown. Not great, but for his standards, I think it was pretty good. I think the problem was Auburn couldn't run the ball. You look at their rushing stats. Bo Nix was their leading rusher with 32 yards, 3.2 yards a carry. The rest of the guys, they're averaging 2.7, 1.7, only 6 carries, 9 carries. They really had to abandon their game plan, in my opinion. You have Bo Nix throwing 42 times. It's not going to go very well for you. And, on the other side, I think Northwestern was the exact opposite. I think they weren't running the ball well. Cam Porter only 3 yards a carry, but they stuck with it. He carried the ball 33 times for 98 yards. He scored a touchdown. It's not efficient, but you run the ball that much, you're going to kill the clock. You're going to keep your offense balanced, and I think that's just what they did. And when they did pass the ball, like you mentioned, I think Peyton Ramsey had a very good game. And just one last point on what I think decided this game here. Third and fourth down efficiency for Auburn was terrible. They were 2 of 13 on third down, 1 of 3 on fourth down. And, this was a game that they had a chance to win. I know the score, it looks lopsided, but they were in this game for a little bit, and then it got away from them. Yards per play, it was only 5.3 for Northwestern, 5.2 for Auburn. So, it's not like Northwestern was just absolutely blitzing them, but they made some mistakes. They couldn't stay balanced. And, you do that against a team like Northwestern's quality, and you're going to lose.
Yeah, most definitely. And, it's going to be an interesting offseason for Auburn. Touching real quickly on that game, Noah, like you said, the run game just wasn't there all game. And from the Auburn teams that we've seen in past that have had a lot of success, they've been that time of possession, game management, hold the ball most of the game with a great running offense. But, we just didn't see that. They got away from it. They threw the ball a lot. And, neither one of us are big fans of Bo Nix. I don't think that they're going to win any games moving forward with him trying to throw the ball 40 or 50 times in a game. I do think that Tank Bigsby opting out probably didn't help them. But even with that, next man up mentality, they can't just have absolutely no run game because one running back who, is good, but it's not like he's Najee Harris to this offense or anything like that, chooses to sit out. It's going to be really interesting for Auburn in this offseason. LSU is down, they're down. Alabama is strong as ever. They need to rebound strong this year and try and make a case in that SEC West next season. And some news coming out this week after Auburn missed on a few head coaches that they wanted to get in there. They finally got their guy in Brian Harsin coming out of Boise State. Nothing against him, though. I'm not really a big fan of this. I think that, you're bringing in a guy who doesn't have any SEC experience. And from what I've seen, it doesn't always work out that great. We have Mike Leach down there at Mississippi State this year. Absolutely abysmal season. Looked really good on offense, the first week or two. And, other than that, just a terrible season by them. So and being out there in the West with Alabama, with LSU, with Texas A&M, who's on the up and up, with Jimbo, I don't room for the guy. I don't see, how it's going to turn out good for him, unfortunately.
It's an interesting call, and obviously it's way too early to say, is it going to work out? But he coached in that bowl game, and, we saw how it went. It didn't go very well. Now, I think they made the right move in firing Gus Malzahn. I've never really been a big fan of his. I think his teams have always been loaded with talent. I think he's always kind of underachieved with it. The only time he really won anything was when he had literally one of the best offenses, one of the best college quarterbacks of all time in Cam Newton. And, you just got to question what Auburn's going to do here. It's funny how quickly things, change, Garth. When we played Auburn, I think it was week 2, they were a top 10 team. And, a lot of people picked Auburn to beat us. And, obviously went out there. I think we beat them convincingly. Now they fall into a 6-5 team. Just really an average team that Auburn has this year. And I think it's, I think they've really fallen off the cliff, to be honest with you. And, we'll see how Brian Harsin works for them. But, they got to pick it up because 6-5 ain't good enough for a program of their caliber.
Yeah, most definitely. Their goal obviously is to compete with Alabama and LSU every season. And like you said, they do pull in great recruiting classes. Usually, they're third, fourth in the SEC. They're, in the top 10 or just outside the top 10 nationally. I think Gus Malzahn is probably vastly underachieved with some of these teams he's had in recent years. So it's definitely much needed by Auburn. Whether or not they got the right guy in there, we're going to have to wait and see. But with that said, these guys have been throwing in some comments here. I want to make sure that we get these up. David asking me, is that coffee in that cup? It is, sir. Coffee tonight. I wanted to be extra fired up being off last week. Seems like it's been forever. So I really wanted to be fired up for you guys tonight. And then John here talking about that big brawl that happened yesterday after the game. And here's, I'm glad that he commented this because, I feel like, these great coaches in the league, Noah, or the NCAA rather, when you listen to them talk about their team, you can tell that they hold their players accountable. You have a high standard of responsibility. When Mike Leach was asked about this, he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, man. He didn't seem really fired up like, hey, I don't want my guys doing this shit. We don't need to have big brawls on the field, especially in a bowl game in a year where we're not even, that good and we barely won. So, probably to most people, it's meaningless. It's like, yeah, whatever. But to me, somebody like Nick Saban is going to absolutely chew his team out for something like that. And you're not even going to see it, honestly. When have we ever seen under Nick Saban have a big brawl? To me, that's just a testament that Mike Leach probably isn't going to work out long term. Mississippi State probably won't ever be, contending for college football playoffs or anything serious like that.
Yeah, obviously it's not a good look. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what happened or that I watched this game. I heard someone say that one of the Mississippi State players might have gotten clipped and injured by someone on Tulsa. I'm not too sure if that's accurate, but either way, I don't think it matters. Obviously, a brawl. As long as no one gets hurt, it's obviously a little bit entertaining as a neutral, but when you look at it objectively, it's not a good look for Mike Leach here. And it's understandable. These kids are young; they're still emotional. Passions run high in football, sports. You get it. Stuff happens sometimes, but an all-out brawl, that's too far. And like you said there, would this happen with Nick Saban? Would it happen with Dabo? No, it would not. So, Michael Leach, I think it's difficult because, like you mentioned, he's unproven in SEC. They haven't had a good year. I do kind of like him, but he has to really pick that program up because I think they severely missed the expectations they wanted to have. I think they wanted to take a step in SEC West, probably be the second team there, and obviously in a team in a year where there's been a lot of disappointing teams like LSU, and obviously Auburn fell off. That they couldn't even finish above those guys. So he's got to take control there. Say, hey, this ain't right. I get you're frustrated, but leave it all on the field. And he's got to pick that team up because I think they want to be better than 4-7. That's not good enough.
Yeah, and I don't know about but personally, looking forward to next season in SEC, I'm really excited that we're going to have a full off season. It's not guaranteed, but being hopeful and optimistic, it looks like we'll have a full off season with football and a full fall practice. So, I'm really excited to see, one, how does recruitment end up? And two, how some of these teams are going to look with a full off season under their belt. But I'm going to throw this up real quickly. Mike saying OSU is up 2 touchdowns now, which is correct. Ohio State, I got the game here on the background with the volume down. They did just score. They're up 28-14. Defense is coming up big for them right now, and offense is looking phenomenal. But let's go ahead and Noah, and let's talk in more detail on this Notre Dame game, something that we surprisingly haven't got into yet. Earlier today, Bama taking on Notre Dame, as we all know, ended up winning 31-14, which I only know this because of our buddy Mike earlier. It's actually the lowest amount of points that Alabama has scored in like 2 seasons. So, Notre Dame, even though they kind of got shellacked in this, the defense did show up for the most part. I mean, holding Alabama to only 31 points is actually pretty damn good. But interesting fact here, Noah. Notre Dame moves to 0-7 in New York Six or college football playoff bowl games since 2000, and pretty much all of them being one-sided losses where they really got beat up pretty good. What were some of your takeaways from this game, Noah? And do you think that Brian Kelly is kind of on the hot seat moving forward?
When you look at it, Garth, it's kind of a weird game, like you mentioned, because do I think Notre Dame played terribly? I don't think so. When you look at the numbers, you can only hold Alabama's offense so much. I mean, Mac Jones, four more passing touchdowns. Najee Harris, 8.3 yards a carry. And Donovan Smith, man, 3 receiving touchdowns, well over 100 yards. This dude's just an absolute monster. The fact they held him to 31, you'd say, is a victory. And, Ian Book, I think, he had an interception, no touchdowns. I think he might have struggled a bit in this game. But, I mentioned this to you several times. I thought if Notre Dame didn't abandon the running game, they had a chance. And, they ran it 38 times in this game. And, their leading rushers, 4 yards a carry. Ian Book had 3.7 yards a carry. They scored 2 rushing touchdowns, over 100 rushing yards. It wasn't like they, ran it 5 times and then had to abandon it because they fell behind. So I think when you look at it, I think it's just a difference in quality. Do I think Notre Dame is a terrible team? Not at all. I think they're a very good team. But Alabama, they're just the standard. And you ask, do I think they need to move on from Brian Kelly? I'll be honest with you. I've never been a fan of Brian Kelly. I think he's had some really, like a Tom Herman or some of the other guys I mentioned today. I think that he's had a lot of talent on those teams, and sure they've been mostly good teams, but when it gets to the big games, like you mentioned, they're 0-7 and those New York Six Bowl or those New Year's Six bowls. They're 0-7 since 2000. I think he's a good coach, but I don't think he's a great coach. And if they want to win anything, I think they might have to move on from him.
Yeah, and me and Mike talked in detail about this game right after it ended earlier. My biggest takeaway with Notre Dame, I feel like they're a really good team top to bottom. They're really balanced. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're a really disciplined team. But when you compare them to teams like Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, even Florida and Georgia, I just feel like, there isn't those guys at the skill positions that are big time players. You come into the game and you're like, hey, this guy is, on par with Devontae Smith or on par with Najee Harris or, Travis Etienne or, and even Ian Book, he's been really solid this year, but he hasn't put up numbers like Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence or any of them. I feel like they just, they lack that firepower to, if they do get behind in a game, there's not that one guy that you can say, hey, just get the ball to this guy. He's going to give us a chance to get back in this game. I feel like what happened, like you said, is, they did get down early. Once they got behind by 2 scores, they kind of abandoned the run game, which I felt, that was the one thing really that was consistent for them early in that game. I feel like they probably felt the pressure to try and score and close that gap and start throwing the ball too much. And that lack of explosive players at the skill position, the passing game just wasn't there to be able to throw, 2 or 3 downs every possession. But yeah, their defense really wasn't terrible. Like I said, they held them to 31 points. I feel like they had some really big missed opportunities. They missed a field goal before the half. They were driving, they got a big stop early in the second quarter, started driving down the field, and I forget exactly what happened, but, they killed their drive just across the 50, just outside of field goal range. I feel like probably going to the half, it should have been 21-21 or 21-17, and it wasn't. And Alabama jumped on them out of the half, and it, was pretty much over from there.
Yeah, obviously you got to play a complete game for 60 minutes against Alabama and have a chance. Look at a team like Georgia. They played Alabama pretty well in the past 3 games, but they lose in the fourth quarter. They lose in the second half. They can't get it done. And I think a team like Clemson, they showed the formula to beat Alabama. You got to get up early, and then you got to keep the pedal to the metal. You can't get conservative. You got to keep throwing the ball, keep airing it out, being aggressive, and you'll have a good chance. And if you fall behind 14-0 like they did instantly, it's over. It's already the game. I know there's 55 minutes left or whatever, but the game's already over from there. They're not going to blow that. So yeah, it's tough for Notre Dame, and I think you make a good point there. Do they have that star player? Ian Book, is he a good quarterback? I think so. Is he great like a Mac Jones? No. Have they ever had that playmaker at quarterback? They've had some good ones, but Everett Golson, Deshaun Kaiser, I've never really seen them have, that guy that you all know is going to make that play for them. And I think Mike's right there. Notre Dame has always been a good team under him, but they have something to build here, in my opinion. I don't think, if they get the right guy in, I think they do have a good chance to win something. And when you look at their team, for example, you guys have a guy like, obviously Kyle Pitts, but you still have a guy like Kadarius Toney. We obviously have our running backs, and I think George Pickens is a great target. You mentioned Devontae Smith, Travis Etienne. Guys like this, these are guys that can take over a game on your offense. And I think they have a lot of good players, but they need to get that more star power in. So if they can get a new guy in who's potentially a great recruiter, they got a chance to win something. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing with Notre Dame to me is, they do recruit very well. A lot of people want to go to Notre Dame. It's very prestigious. They have this great legacy and history with college football. It's one of those schools that growing up as a high school kid, you'd be more than ecstatic to go to. So it's not like, they have to twist these kids' arms and, have a really tough time recruiting. They can definitely get the people in. And with that being said, I feel like that kind of hurts Brian Kelly, at least for me as an outsider, is, hey, look, you have all the power in the world to go out and get these top class athletes, just like in Alabama or Clemson. It's not good enough to just make the college football playoffs and get killed every year. You want to at least be competitive and win a couple of games here and there, even if you don't win a national championship, at least be competitive, get in there, and don't just get killed every year. I feel like the program is very loyal to Brian Kelly. He does have an overall very good record. It's just, in the biggest games, he doesn't always come up, and usually it's a lopsided loss. And with that said, they can absolutely get a top team coach there as well. Will he be fired for somebody else? We don't know. I haven't seen anything lately that's shows any sign of him being out of there. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, let's talk about this Ohio State Clemson game, which has been really exciting so far, Noah. I know the game's already started. Clemson was favored by 7, over under of 68, which is looking pretty good so far, as it is 28-14 already. 2 minutes to go in the first half. So as I said, I've been paying pretty close attention to the game now, especially before we got on here. Ohio State's defense has been the story to me so far, as well as Justin Fields. But, they've been coming up huge. They've been, making stops, getting off the field, staying fresh, getting the ball back for the Ohio State offense. And, they've been absolutely lighting up that very, very good Clemson defense so far. Who's your pick to win this game, Noah?
Well, it's obviously tough. You can't count on Clemson, but, if a guy like Justin Fields keeps playing like this all game, they're going to win. He's just been absolutely phenomenal so far. 12 of 13, 172 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, when your guy has 3 times as many touchdowns as he has incompletions, I'm really going to fancy your chances in that game. And, I think a guy that's kind of been underrated this year on Ohio State and definitely in college football, Trey Sherman, man. What can you say about this guy? 111 yards, averaging 7.9 yards a carry, he scored a touchdown. Just absolutely phenomenal. And they don't have their first round pick. They got it from the Texans because Brian Flores is a genius. But yeah, and you mentioned there the defense. Travis Etienne, 5 carries for 9 yards. Sure he scored a touchdown, but I think most of the damage he's done has been through the air. And they've only run the ball 10 times. We're almost at halftime. So if it keeps going like this, Clemson's going to be one-dimensional, and they've shown they can't stop Ohio State. So I hate to say it, but if it keeps going like this, Ohio State's definitely going to win. Now, they looked like they were going to win against Clemson last year, and they blew it, so we'll see.
Yeah, and one thing that I've talked a little bit about this week with some guys is, Dabo, as great of a coach as he is, I really don't like with how public he was with the whole, Ohio State, getting rewarded for not playing a lot of games. And, I only rank them as like my 11th best in the nation and all that. We can go over stats all day, but I feel like there's a lot of, stuff that you can't write down on paper that you can't measure statistically, like how hard guys prepare going into a game, how much, motivation they have to win and the want to win the game and go out there and play to their best of their abilities. And I feel like he probably gave this team a ton of motivation, to prepare moving into this game with all those kind of comments. And I think right now what we're seeing so far through the first half is just, Ohio State physically is outplaying them. They seem to be playing a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder. And, obviously that isn't totally just on Dabo, but I feel like he definitely, like I said, a little bit more motivation and want to prepare and be as possible for this game. We're gonna have to wait and see how the second half plays out. But right now, Ohio State looking really good. Proving to people at least so far that they do indeed belong.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Quality wise, they always belong in the playoff. The question was, should you put a team in that's only played 6 or 7 games? And neither of us can be hypocrites about this. We talked about it a lot. We had a conversation about it. Should they have gotten in? It wishy-washy with the whole 6 or 7 games, but obviously they're showing. You can understand the being in, and they're showing they definitely belong. So no big complaints there. But man, Justin Fields, he's just phenomenal, and obviously, I've had my opinions about him in the past. I think the way he left us was a bit, questionable, but obviously he's a fantastic player. And I actually saw him linked to the Falcons in a mock draft once, so that'd be very interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, just incredible performance so far.
Yeah, and there was definitely, a lot of question marks, and even they talked about it on College Game Day today with Justin Fields. He had a pretty bad performance against Northwestern in that Big Ten championship game, and actually injured his thumb. I don't know what severity, if he just jammed it, or maybe it's even broken for all we know. But he just didn't look good. Like I said, it was a very close game until they started running the ball all over Northwestern, and tonight's been the exact opposite. As you said, the numbers don't lie. He's been performing excellent. But one guy that I forgot to touch on that you mentioned, Noah, is Trey Sherman, man. He is running really freaking hard. He looks like he wants to go out there every play, and he wants to run through the Clemson defense. He doesn't want to juke around them or, run out of bounds. He just wants to run the ball right through that Clemson defense. And so far, phenomenal performance. One thing that I actually didn't even know about him until I was watching the game earlier is he actually transferred from Oklahoma. And he's probably really excited right now that he did decide to do that and be on this Ohio State team. But, either one of these teams is going to have a really tall task with Alabama. I feel like Clemson might be a little bit better suited to handle that because their defense has been so phenomenal for the majority of the season. But, it may end up being Ohio State. We'll have to see how the rest of the game plays out. But, yeah, I'm really excited for that championship game, Noah.
Yeah, I am as well. And, just for our viewers who might not be catching it again, Ohio State is driving again. 1st and 10 at the Clemson 38. And, John, you make a good point. Do I think Brian Kelly's going to be fired? I don't think so. And I agree with Mike there. Sherman is a beast, but, they've had their best season in a very long time under him. Sure, you got to think, if they got a new guy in there, they could probably take the next step. But like you mentioned, and, I think, like we said with Todd Grantham, Garth, I think, there's certain guys that you have loyalty to with the program, and it's understandable, although I think you got to be a bit ruthless sometimes. I think they will be loyal to Brian Kelly there, and I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah, I feel like they most definitely got to give him one more year. And I feel like probably part of the mindset and the logic behind it is, hey, with Kelly, we know what we've got. Most likely we're going to make the playoffs. Whether we win or not, we're going to make it. Whereas, you could hire somebody, can him, and, maybe you go down for a few seasons and you have, a 500 season or even potentially a losing season, readjusting and installing a new system and coaching staff. And maybe for the Notre Dame athletic department and, the fan base and all of that, they rather have Brian Kelly and know what to get versus, that the big what if. But yeah, both of these teams now, from what I've seen so far, um, they're probably going to have their hands full with Alabama. One thing that I want to touch with Alabama is I've been saying it for quite a while now. The offense is absolutely phenomenal. It's really hard to stop that offense. Devontae Smith is on a tear, obviously, he potentially could win the Heisman. But for Alabama, and how I see how you beat them is that defense, man. It really hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but it's not good. I mean, it's not absolutely terrible, but it's definitely not good. And I feel like if you can really beat up on that defense, control the clock, run the ball the whole game like Notre Dame should have tried to do, and get up, not trying to play catch up, trying to turn it into that, back alley brawl where it's a, time possession dominated game and who wins on the trenches. That's how you're going to beat them. And like I said, Clemson probably is a little bit more situated to handle that kind of fight. But what I've seen from Ohio State so far, they could play like this. They very well could be in a game against Alabama.
Oh, absolutely, man. Obviously with the history, Alabama and Clemson played so many times. I think twice or 3 times actually. I think in the national championship game. I could be wrong on that. My mind's slipping me a little bit, but obviously they played multiple times in the championship game. I know they played in a semifinal one year as well that Alabama won. There's a lot of history there, so I think that they would probably be a better matchup. But like you said, if Ohio State just keeps steamrolling that Clemson defense like they're doing, you
Which
got
they're actually inside the 10 right now, Noah. First down.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, they're just doing so well, man. And like you mentioned, in a year where a lot of defenses have been underperforming or just straight bad, Clemson is one of the few teams that has both a solid offense and a solid defense. And they're just getting mowed down right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and real quick, I don't want to spend too much time on this just because there's so much to go over in football. Mike saying that Coach K missed tomorrow's game versus FSU due to COVID concerns. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely very scary. Coach K is no spring chicken. So if he does have COVID, unfortunately, he's at very high risk for that. So, I'd rather him be safe and take his way away from the team to make sure that everything's good. John here, and this actually just came out earlier today. He mentioned Zach Wilson and a team that could take a big step back. Most definitely, Zach Wilson was definitely the heart and soul of that team. He did declare for the NFL draft. Kyle Trask did as well. So, as me and Noah have talked about a lot on here, this QB class headed into the draft next season is absolutely loaded. I don't know exactly where Zach Wilson's going to go. I feel like I could see him potentially dropping, maybe late for early second. I feel like guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, potentially even Trask, will probably go ahead of him, but definitely going to be there for, a team that needs a quarterback.
Yeah, obviously, first of all, Coach K, I know it's not easy to tell because he does actually look very, very good for his age, but this is a guy who's 73 years old. And COVID, sure doesn't really affect young people like us, but, for older people or those with disease, it can actually kill them. So, best wishes to him right there. And Zach Wilson, we mentioned him a lot. We've been high on him for a few months now. This is a guy who's done very well this season. Like we said, it's a loaded draft class. I think Lawrence and Fields, they're the top two without question. Then I think after the season he had, you've got to say Kyle Trask is probably going to be third. And then I'd say it's a toss up. Is it Zach Wilson or is it Trey Lance? I think there's a big competition there, but the NFL draft is going to be very exciting to watch, especially if you like quarterbacks like I do. So going to be very fun here for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we all know, my Chargers do not need a quarterback this year. With how big of a Kyle Trask fan I am, it would be really good to go to the Chargers, but it's definitely not a need. I would like to see him go somewhere like Pittsburgh or Indy. I feel like he could potentially be good in the NFL, but he's got to be a team. He can't go to some team that's got absolutely nothing. He's not going to do very well. But if he can go to a team like the Colts or the Steelers, who have a good system, have good management and front office and team around him, he could have a pretty solid career. But yeah, Ohio State just scores again, Noah, 35-14 with only 11 seconds left in the half. Clemson's going to have to come out of the half absolutely firing, or it's going to get ugly. I honestly didn't see this coming. Like I said, I expected Ohio State to play really good because I feel like they had a lot of extra motivation, but my gut told me Clemson was going to win. So, I'm kind of in shock right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't just lie and say, oh, I would have picked Ohio State because I would have picked Clemson as well. Justin Fields four passing touchdowns and a half. I mean, what else can you say? But just phenomenal performance in first half from Ohio State.
Yeah, and I look forward to watching the second half after we get off here tonight. But with that said, let's touch on one last thing real quick on the college football scene, and then we'll jump over to really, really big week of NFL and playoff implications. Week that I'm really excited for. I want to touch on this real quick. There was a lot of hype from some people and a lot of frustration from others. Jamie Chadwell, Coastal Carolina's head coach, named Associated Press Coach of the Year. As we all know, 11-1. Where he'll end up ultimately in the top 10, we have to wait and see. But currently ranked 9th. Really good season by him, Noah. No arguments out of me. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, no way he should have won this award. Definitely deserving. But I know some guys would have liked to see Pat Fitzgerald out of Northwestern win it. I'm not going to lie, I don't know his name, but the head coach at Cincinnati for the year that he had as well. But definitely really deserving as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You can make an argument. We mentioned Pat Fitzgerald before. I think he could easily be Coach of the Year. But you can't argue with a guy who took a team that's relatively unknown to 11-1 and top 10 ranking. Not at all. And I think there's obviously other candidates like Fitzgerald, the Cincinnati coach, or even the Liberty coach who actually beat Coastal Carolina because they went 10-1 as well. So there's a lot of good candidates. But I'm not getting the uproar for it. I think it is a very fair pick.
Yeah, most definitely. Mike saying, "Damn, who would have thought Clemson may run out of the building?" Yeah, man.
No one.
There's still another half to be played, but they really got to get their shit together, or else they're going to be very ugly. And then Mike adding to what we were just talking about, he feels that it should have been the Cincy coach. Like I said, he was definitely deserving as well. I probably wasn't going to protest no matter who they chose this year. There were a lot of deserving guys.
That said, a coach of the year doesn't lose that game to Georgia.
That's true.
They had that game and they completely blew it. So
yep, I have to agree there. Now with that lead that they had, and having the season that they had and playing a team like Georgia, that's one that you got to have, even if it wasn't, like a college football playoff. Still it's a New Year's Six bowl game. But let's go ahead. Let's jump over to some NFL. I'm really, really excited this week. As we know, it is the final week of the regular season. There is a lot of big games in terms of playoff implications. We have on the AFC side, we have the Browns, the Dolphins, the Ravens, and the Colts all looking to get in. Unfortunately, one of them isn't going to get in because there's only room for 3 of them. As far as the Colts go, I'll touch on them first because I know their situation better than any of the others just because I've been following them so closely. This guy right here earlier this week said, after some rumors came out about him potentially retiring after the season, that, hey, if the Colts want me back for a round 2, I'm all for it. I feel like I'm really going to want to still be playing after the season. For the Colts, Noah, they need to obviously win, which they have the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. I feel like, that's a game that they're going to win. Nothing's guaranteed in the NFL, but Jaguars, they don't want to win. They want to keep that number 1 draft pick. I feel like the Colts are definitely going to take care of business. They're healthy. They're fired up for the playoffs. But, for them to get in, they either need one of those other 3 teams already mentioned to lose, or even they're still alive for the division as the Titans take on the Houston Texans, in Houston, a team who may actually play them tough. And should the Titans lose and they win, they would win the division. But, what are your thoughts on this AFC battle for those wild card spots, Noah?
Well, first of all, I just got to say, Garth, obviously 2020 was an absolutely horrible year. And hopefully this one is better. But, just talking strictly NFL, I think in all seriousness, this is one of the best regular seasons I have ever seen. In the NFC, the the number 1 seed is going right down to the wire. In the AFC, it's completely competitive. you just mentioned 4 teams there. I think they're all very good teams, easily playoff worthy. But someone's got to miss, and that's with the 7th team. If we still had 6 teams, 2 of those teams would miss. It's absolutely ridiculous how incredible the AFC has been this year. And honestly, yeah, exactly. I mean, Mike is right on the point there that they made the right call adding a 7th team, in my opinion, because one team missing is bad enough, but 2 of these teams missing would be just downright criminal. So, you know, obviously we've talked about the Colts. I think they do have a favorable matchup. The Jags have clinched the number 1 pick. They're going to be getting Trevor Lawrence. They should win. That said, obviously week 1 the Jaguars beat them. That feels like a century ago now. So they can't underestimate them. Anything could happen. It'd be absolutely embarrassing if they somehow miss the playoffs, getting swept by the team with the number 1 pick. But I expect them to go out there and get it done. That said, that Steelers game, Garth. Obviously it makes you pretty upset rooting for the Colts, but I think that's the game they had, and that second half was just completely pathetic, man. Just terrible.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that you reminded me of that because I probably would have forgot to touch on that quickly. But yeah, Colts came out firing in the first half, looked really good. Steelers got some momentum before halftime and just carried it through the second half, and just kind of dominated the Colts on both sides of the ball. I will say that one of my biggest takeaways from that game is the Colts completely got away from their run game. On the first half, Jonathan Taylor was running all over the Steelers' defense. The offensive line was really controlling the line of scrimmage. In the second half, they got down after the Steelers gained some momentum and just completely abandoned the run game. I don't have the exact numbers, but I feel like they barely even ran the ball whatsoever in the second half. And unfortunately, Philip Rivers is not the quarterback anymore that's going to go out there and throw the ball 50 times a game for 400 or 500 yards. They gotta run the ball. And be two-dimensional on offense and set up play actions and screens and all that kind of stuff. But as far as the playoff picture goes for the AFC, I feel like, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that it looks like the road for the Dolphins is the hardest. They're going up to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And this isn't a game that the Bills are going to be resting starters because they are playing for seeding still. Potentially could end up the number 2 seed. I don't know if they still have the ability to get the overall number 1. I think Kansas City winning last week took that, possibility away. But, they're still playing for that 2 seed, and a loss could drop them down to the 3rd seed. So, they're not going to be resting starters. They're not going to take the Dolphins lightly and just take a game off. And as we all know, the Bills have been on a tear, especially on the offensive side of the ball. What are your thoughts on that game, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not going to be tough. How I feel about the Dolphins and Brian Flores. I think they are a very good team, up and coming. The fact they have a chance to make the playoffs, and they have a top 3 pick from the Texans is just absolutely fantastic. And let me just read this comment here from Mark because I think he has a great point. Unfortunately, I think the Finns get left out. I know Noah wants Flores to make it, which I do too. Just think Buffalo wants to keep the 2nd seed, and Browns are catching a major break with Rudolph starting. But obviously, they still have to win. And, I think everything he said there is spot on. Luckily I was prepared. I got the playoff standings, playoff picture up right here. Like you said, the Chiefs actually have clinched the number 1 seed, so the playoffs are going to run through KC. The Bills are currently number 2, Steelers number 3. Both those teams have clinched their division. After that, it's just all up in the air. The Titans, they're the 4th seed right now because they're obviously the last division winner. The Colts, they're actually the one on the outside looking in, number 8 on the bubble. So they got to win this game, and they got to hope for some help. But it's interesting. The Dolphins, the Ravens, and the Browns. The Browns definitely have an easy matchup with the Bengals, and like Mike said, there the Ravens or the whoever's playing the Steelers, Rudolph isn't starting, so it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's actually Browns taking on the Steelers and Ravens with the Bengals. But yeah, the Steelers are resting a lot of guys. Also, they are banged up a little bit, so it makes sense for them. With that being the case, I feel like the Browns are going to win this. I don't think that Mason Rudolph's going to lead them to a win, especially with the Browns knowing that they're playing for their playoff lives. And with the Ravens and Bengals, will the Bengals come out and play the Ravens tough? Yeah, probably. The Ravens have been good, but they definitely haven't been dominating and blowing teams out. So I feel like the Bengals could play them really toughly, but I got to say, I see Browns beating the Steelers, Ravens beating the Bengals. So for the Colts, they got to hope that the Bills take care of business. And should they not, the Colts are actually going to be left out unless somehow the Titans do lose to the Texans. But, it's kind of really interesting how the playoffs have shaped up because, if the Colts had held on and won last week, Noah, they actually would be the 3 seed right now. And should the Dolphins beat the Bills this weekend and the Colts beat the Jags, they actually would have been the 2 seed. So, losing that game to the Steelers was absolutely devastating. And I know I'm not dwelling on it right now, but looking back, losing to Jaguars week 1 was just as devastating because even with that loss to the Steelers, had they beat the Jags, they still would be in control of that division and at the 3 seed right now, potentially, or sorry, 4 seed rather, potentially moving up to the 3 should the Steelers lose this weekend. But, as I said, you can't dwell on the past. You can't, as the Colts, you can't look back and beat yourselves up over that. You got to take care of business this week and hope for some luck from some other teams. But if I got to go out on a limb and make my prediction here, I'm going to have to say that the Dolphins probably lose a close one to the Bills. Colts get in. I don't know whether it's a wild card or as division. I don't see the Titans losing to the Texans with what's on the line. But yeah, I got to go Browns, Ravens, and Colts in no particular order. And unfortunately, the Dolphins just missing out on what's been nothing short of a phenomenal season by them.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with you there. I think, going on the road to play the Bills last week of the season, the Bills are 12-3. The number 2 seed, like I mentioned, a very tough matchup. And, obviously I mixed up the matchups there a little bit. My bad there. But, the Steelers and the Browns, you'd expect the Browns to win that game with Rudolph starting. If Ben was starting, I'd say completely different. I'd say the Browns probably would actually miss. Because Rudolph is starting, I think they have a great chance there, especially at home. And then, the Ravens and Bengals, no disrespect to the Bengals. I think they're improving. I think once Joe Burrow eventually comes back, which might be 2022 until that happens, I think they will be a better team. But, right now they just stink. And, the Colts and Titans, like you mentioned, very favorable matchups. So, if the Dolphins lose, they're going to be out. And I could definitely see that. The Colts are obviously hoping for that because if the Dolphins somehow pull it off, the Colts will be on the outside looking in. You're going to see a very good team miss the playoffs. And, it's going to be very sad to see. But at the same time, you got to love how competitive it is and how that, none of these teams are bad. They're all very good teams.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. We were talking about it not too long ago, tonight with the whole fact that they did change the playoff format and there is a 7th seed now, and even with having done that, there's still going to be a very good AFC team that misses the playoffs this year. I will say I do wish that Big Ben was starting, nothing against the Browns, but, I'd rather the Steelers win and the Dolphins and the Colts be in because I am pulling for the Dolphins a little bit for no particular reason. But yeah, I put a comment up there from Chris saying that, everybody's scared of playing Buffalo right now. And there was one guy that I wanted to give a big shout out to tonight, in particular from the Buffalo Bills, a guy that I really haven't said too much about, not because, for any specific reason. I just haven't talked about him. And Stephon Diggs, man, what a season by this guy. Came over from the Minnesota Vikings in the offseason, as we all know. He was always great. He was always great for the Vikings. But this year, he's just taken it to a whole nother level. By far his career best season and a huge number 1 wide receiver for, Josh Allen, who is going to be in the MVP mix come end of the season. And also, breaking news, this guy right here, Kenny Stills, has been picked up by the Buffalo Bills. I don't know how, big of a threat he's going to be for them because obviously, he's going to have to develop some chemistry with Josh Allen and get used to that system, and the scheme and all of that stuff. But, regardless, even if he's just out there to draw a defender, take some pressure off of Stephon Diggs, that's huge for them.
Yeah, I think Kenny Stills is a good player. I think that is a very good signing. Wherever he's played, the Saints or the Dolphins or even with the Texans for a little bit, I think he's always been a pretty good receiver. So to get him, I think is a really solid addition. But like you said there, man, Stephon Diggs, I believe he's leading the entire NFL in receiving yards. I know he was at some point. I'm not sure if he still is. Just absolutely phenomenal. And when he was in Minnesota, we heard all this stuff. Always a cancer. He's not a true number one. Bullshit. You know, all his teammates seem to love him, and he's easily a number one. I just think, in my opinion, when he was in Minnesota, he was playing alongside another number one because Adam Thielen is also a very good receiver. 14 receiving touchdowns this year. That is a very quiet season for Adam Thielen because Justin Jefferson's going off. But yeah, I mean, Stephon Diggs is a beast, and his teammates seem to love him. Josh Allen, his favorite target pretty much. And you add in Kenny Stills with that. I think Cole Beasley's had a really good season. The running game with guys like Singletary, Zach Moss. Really the offense is coming together. So I think was it Chris that said that? I think Chris is right on the money. This is a team, especially if they go in as the number 2 seed, you have to go to Buffalo where it's probably going to be freezing cold, and they're used to that, and you're not. Going to be a very, very difficult place to play. I am really, I'm rooting for the Colts because, like you mentioned, Philip Rivers, this might be potentially his last chance to win it. We'll see if he comes back, but he's not going to have many more chances. But man, I'm really rooting for the Bills as well. Just fantastic team. They're finally pulling it together. Great fan base, and they're a great team.
Yeah, and ironically, and I've mentioned it a few times throughout the season, the offense is the thing to be scared about with the Bills this season, and not so much the defense. And one thing I agree with you on, Noah, is the 2 seed for them should they, win tomorrow and the Steelers not somehow beat the Browns with no Big Ben. That's going to be huge for them. The only team they'd have to travel to is Kansas City, which, this late in the year plays in a very similar environment as the Buffalo Bills, cold weather and potentially snow. I think that's huge for the Bills. I'm a firm believer in teams that play in warm weather the whole entire season usually don't travel well to cold environments. It's just something that could be just a coincidence. Take it as you will. It's just my personal experience, and especially in playoffs, teams in warm weather don't travel and perform the best in cold weather environments outside. But some good comments coming in here. These guys wanting us to touch on the NFC side of things. Noah, Mike Aldridge saying that I think the Bears get left out. Unfortunately, they could beat Packers, but Rodgers has owned them, and they're trying to hang on to the 1 seed. I got to agree. And I know this week, all the Saints fans out there, our guy David, are going to be really, really big Bears fans for the sake that they want that 1 seed. And unfortunately, I think that the Packers are going to find a way to get it done. Aaron Rodgers is going to have another solid performance, and they're going to get that 1 seed. And I will say, Noah, that as good as the Saints have been, I don't think that, the thing that I just touched on, I don't think that they want to go to Lambeau in the cold weather and the snow. It's just not a matchup that favors them. So, this is a really big week for the NFC for the 1 seed as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Garth, you actually kind of stole my point there because I was going to say exactly that. Mentioning a team like the Bills, it's going to be tough going there. Well, the Packers, even when, no fans, I think they'd have one of the best home field advantages in the NFL because going to Lambeau is not easy. Sure, the Packers, I think they have some holes in their team, but if they get the number 1 seed, that's going to be tough for anyone in the MC to go there and play them. And, I know David, he's obviously fired up because he wants the Saints to get the number one seed. But, yeah, I mean, I think Mike mentions an interesting point there. The Bears, they're going to go 8-8. They're probably going to miss the playoffs, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to beat the Packers because, like you said, Rodgers just kind of owns them. And, the playoff implications in the NFC are going to be tight, too. Obviously, the number 1 seed. And also, the NFC East, which one of these absolutely terrible teams is going to make the playoffs? It's kind of funny, right? And the AFC, 1-10-win team is going to miss it. Hilchi, I got you, man. But yeah, 1-10-win team in the AFC is going to miss it. If there were 6 teams, there'd still be 2. But even on that old format, a team like the Giants or the Cowboys can still make the playoffs. I mean, this year has just been so unbelievably bizarre. But yeah, I mean, the number 1 seed, we got the Packers playing the Bears, the Saints playing the Panthers. Both games I'd expect them to win, so I think that'll probably stay the same. You got the Seahawks, they're very quiet 3 seed right now. The Bucks, they're playing the Falcons this week. the Falcons, they played them tough about 2 weeks ago, but unfortunately, as typical Falcons, they had to blow that game. So we'll see how that one goes. And then, in the hunt, the NFC East representative, 3 teams there that can make it. Washington playing the Eagles. You'd suspect Washington could probably get a result there because the Eagles are terrible. And then obviously a do or die game for the Cowboys and Giants. They're playing each other. So, the Cards as well. They're playing the Rams. Wide open right now in the NFC.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. We've mentioned it before. You've got an absolutely abysmal division this season, and yet somebody is still going to for sure make it out of that division. And as far as I'm concerned, probably get bounced in the first round. I don't really see any of those teams playing, upset, especially to who they potentially be playing. I don't see the Cowboys going on the road and beating a 2-seed Saints or 3-seed Seahawks. But we'll have to wait and find out. We do know that the Giants did go on a wild card run and make it to the Super Bowl and upset the Patriots. But unfortunate for you Giants fans out there, you don't have a prime Eli Manning, and you don't have a defense of that caliber. So I just don't see it happening. But yeah, like you said, huge game, Cowboys and Giants. Should the Cowboys win and things go right, make it in the playoffs, I mean, you're going to have Andy Dalton leading a very banged up and not so good roster, but it'd be cool to see. I can't really say for sure who I think is going to come out of that division and represent them in the playoffs. If 2020 couldn't be bizarre enough, we have 3 teams in the NFC East with losing records competing for the 4 seed. And imagine, you could be a team like the Bucs and you're going on the road to face, a losing record Giants or Redskins. It's kind of crazy as far as I'm concerned, but just so happens to be how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to chuckle a bit at it because it is kind of funny. Obviously our guy Brian Attard, who runs the Sports Box, I've been seeing him having these meltdowns lately because of the Cowboys winning these games. And, they could potentially make the playoffs, get bounced out, and they've completely screwed their draft picks. So, you've got to chuckle there a little bit. But, in all seriousness, some big matchups this week in NFC. Hey, John, I'm not sleeping on the Bucs, man. I saw those guys 2 weeks ago have a massive comeback against us. I think they're a very good team. But, yeah, I mean, some do-or-die matchups here. They're fighting for the number 1 seed. Obviously, we mentioned, the Cowboys and Giants. That's an elimination game for both those teams. Whoever wins has a chance to get in if Washington loses. And then Cards and Rams, this is a game I don't think anyone has really mentioned. The Cards need this game against the Rams. They're 1 game behind them. This is a do-or-die game for Arizona, who I think most people had it as a playoff team. Well, right now they're kind of on the outside looking in. They're on the bubble. So, they're 8th in the NFC right now. And just fantastic season, man. The NFC is complete chaos right now. The AFC, every team is fantastic. A 10-win team is going to miss it while the New York Giants are going to be hosting a playoff game. It's just kind of funny, but, fantastic season, man. And in all seriousness, I'm really happy they added that 7th seed because it has made the playoff race just absolute chaos. And, obviously I want the Falcons to be in it. They suck. They're not in it, but as a neutral fan looking at it, fantastic.
Yeah, and I want to touch on, what John said there too with the Bucs. If you guys didn't already know, I am rooting for the Bucs a little bit just for the sake of me being a Tom Brady fan. But my biggest thing with them, is the inconsistency. 1 week Tom Brady comes out and absolutely lights somebody up, and the offense looks like one of the best in the league, and all those offensive weapons that they have are playing well. And then the next week, they're absolutely struggling on offense and can't put up points and turning the ball over. So, for me, being unbiased, looking from the outside in at that team and their playoff chances, that definitely worries me a little bit. You got to be consistent in playoffs, and that's one thing that Tom Brady has been throughout his career, but, definitely not this season with the Bucs. But yeah, also, another thing that they're talking about here in the comments, Noah, is some of the quarterback situations. Chris saying that Andy Dalton is the answer in Dallas. That was one thing I was really interested to see. A lot of people were like, oh, Andy Dalton's going to come in and take the job away from Dak. He did get the job, not because he beat out Dak, unfortunately. But, I don't think that he's been phenomenal. I don't think he's really even been great. He's just kind of been a placeholder for them. I don't see him really, if should they make playoffs, upsetting anybody. But and another one here is Chris again. Rams have. Oops, sorry, that's Mike's comment. Rams having Wolford starting at quarterback, and Mike adding, that's a guy who's never even taken a snap. So definitely on that, that NFC side, some very interesting quarterback situations. And like we said, these teams are playing for playoffs, and you've got Joe Schmo off 8th Street coming in and playing quarterback. It's kind of crazy to see. But what would 2020 be without this week to end it off?
Yeah, I mean, go figure. Sure, it's 2021, but this is still the 2020 season. Just been absolutely bizarre. Obviously, the Rams have Wolford starting, and you could potentially have my man, the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, making a playoff run. So, Rams starting a quarterback that has a current LinkedIn account. He said he would delete it if they win. Well, there you go, right there. I mean, oh my God, man. It's fun to joke about, but seriously, this season has been so fantastic. We're gonna have a lot of great games this week, and just touching on the Bucks real quick because John mentioned it, and Mike is in here. I told Mike a few weeks ago, that was a good win against the Falcons to come back in that regard. But if they go down like they did against us, against an actual good team in the playoffs, you're not going to come back. So they have a lot to clean up there. I think they're a bit inconsistent. I do think they are a very good team because their offense is loaded. I think their defense is pretty good. Although I've heard Mike say that they're actually a bit overrated, but I'd take being overrated over a lot of their past defense, which were just straight crap. So they're going to be very interesting in the playoffs. Obviously, Tom Brady in the playoffs, can't count him out. He has had a fantastic season. Actually, had a perfect passer rating against the Lions last week. So, he could potentially get hot. And if we think these playoff races are going to be fun, what about the actual playoffs? I mean, this is just going to be incredible. The New York Giants making a run to the Super Bowl. Daniel Jones, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and as we talked about, there's going to be no fans, or if fans at all, very limited. So it really does take away from the home field advantage. And that's why I say I think that the biggest advantage for playoffs this year is the cold weather teams potentially hosting, as I said, a warm weather team kind of makes up for having no fans. But John here with another good comment. Green Bay losing their left tackle. He's referring to David Bakhtiari there, who became the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history earlier in the season. He did go down with a torn ACL Thursday in practice, unfortunately. I do agree with him. That's going to be a pretty big loss for them. Left tackles are very valuable in the NFL, especially ones that are play at an elite level. That's your blindside protector for your quarterback, and really sets the edge there on the offensive line to run the ball to the left-hand side. But I feel like, yes, is it a big blow? Is it going to cause the Packers to all of a sudden have huge issues on offense? I don't think so, because I think that their strength has really been passing the ball with how phenomenal Devontae Adams, huge shout out to that guy, Noah. One of my favorite wide receivers, not named Keenan Allen or Mike Williams in the NFL. Absolutely phenomenal season. He's right up there, with Stephon Diggs and some of these other guys who are just, putting up ungodly numbers. And they've got a lot of guys kind of a wide receiver by committee that, have been performing pretty well for them. And, so I just think that, yes, will it hurt them? Most definitely. Losing a player of that caliber in such an important position on the offense is always going to hurt. Does it cause them to all of a sudden not be good enough to win games? Definitely not. So yeah, could the Bears upset them? Definitely. But like I said, I got to go with the Packers winning this week, securing that 1 seed and making sure that the road goes through them in Lambeau Field.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. You can't say that the Packers, losing a guy who's easily a top 5 tackle, probably closer to top 3, it's going to hurt. But that said, I've heard some Packers fans say they actually have some good depth on the offensive line. So we'll see how they plug that up. But yeah, man, going into Lambeau, even with no fans, it'd be a tough task for any team. And, both college football and NFL, I think these have been very good seasons with, obviously the surprise teams in college football, like a team like Cincy or Coastal Carolina, Liberty. And then in the NFL, the playoff races are just insane. I just wish we had fans because this has been such a really good season. And I understand obviously why there aren't, but it just kind of makes you think: will we ever have seasons as unpredictable and incredible as this again, or is it just a product of this COVID world that we all live in now? So hopefully this isn't a once in a lifetime thing that we get sports wise, because it's just been incredible.
Yeah, and as crazy as it's been, it'd be even better to see some of the stuff that's happening, with packed stadiums because, at least for me personally, watching games this year, not hearing, the roar of the fans reacting or the loud boos at the referees or, whatever that we hear out of fans, it just unfortunately is not the same. And, we tremendously miss fans being in the stands. I know the athletes do as well. Mike here. Oop, wrong comment again. Huge stop by Clemson. So what Mike's referring to there is out of the half, Ohio State did get the football. And they marched right down the field into the red zone right away. Clemson holding them to what looks like should be a field goal after the commercial break, which yes is huge, but at the same time, Clemson already being down as much as they are, you probably didn't even want to see any points scored there. But yeah, definitely going to be a really fun day of football tomorrow, Noah, with so many possibilities for playoffs and, nothing really being set in stone. All we have for sure is that KC is going to be the 1 seed. And after that, everything's in the mix. And for me as a football fan, unfortunately my Chargers aren't in it, but, outside of them not making it, it's about as good as ever with, how many possible outcomes we could have and, so many teams still being alive for a playoff spot.
Absolutely agreed. Man. Obviously, my team sucks as well, but you know, I'm a big Falcons fan, but I'm a football fan first. So obviously, you want your team to be in it, do it very well. But when they aren't, you got to look at the rest of the league, and it's just been absolutely incredible. I'm really rooting hard for the Colts, obviously for Philip Rivers, rooting for the Dolphins and the Bills. So go figure they're actually playing each other. But yeah, it's just going to be a very interesting playoffs, and you know all these teams, have we ever gone to a week 17 with so many teams not having clinched and so much to play for? I'm not sure. So um, this Sunday is going to be one of the best Sundays in a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Mike correcting me here. I actually missed the play. I was kind of just guessing. There was actually an interception in the end zone, so Ohio State did come up with no points. So like I said, that's about as good as Clemson could have asked for. They didn't let up any points out of the half, and now they can try to chip away at this lead. But yeah, actually, here's a comment that just come in from David. Kamara has COVID, and this was something that I plan on touching on tonight. Obviously, it's a very huge blow for the Saints. Um, I was reading a thing. It determines, or rather, comes down to what seed they get and how the playoff scheduling works for next weekend. Should they have to play a Saturday game with the COVID protocol, Noah, Kamara would be out for not only this weekend but next as well. Or they get a Sunday game and he could potentially play as long as he passes the COVID protocol. So that's really huge, and unfortunately a big part of the NFL season, and could be a very huge impact with the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, all bias aside, I'm not a Saints fan, but, I agree, David. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with COVID. But, Kamara's been the best running back in the league this year, in my opinion. I think he's the first team All Pro. What he does from the line of scrimmage, just all purpose is absolutely incredible. If he's out, that is a tremendous loss. And I also saw that your guy, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, he did something very stupid at a house party. So apparently he's getting tested for it as well. Um, I know I don't know the specifics, but I saw David say that they had a lot of players out. He mentions, or Mike mentions Devin White and Shaq Barrett. So, a lot of players are getting this right now. This is something we expected. You could not expect, in this world, where there's hundreds of thousands of cases that people wouldn't get it, that people would miss games, and games would potentially be delayed or canceled. So the fact we've gotten this far in the season with it's still going, and they've managed it. I know Roger Goodell gets a lot of crap, and rightfully so, but I think they've made the best out of a terrible situation this year. So the fact we've had these sports at all is a testament to the fact that these leagues have done a very good job, and this Sunday is going to be incredible.
Yeah, and with that said, I do want to give a shout out to the whole league in general for being able to still give us football this season, and for a lot of players, yes, they're getting paid millions of dollars. Don't get me wrong, they're in a very fortunate situation, which they've worked very hard to get there. Take nothing away from them, but at the same time, with COVID, they're having to be very, very strict with their social lives. They're basically just going to practice, being socially distanced, wearing a mask, pretty much 24/7, and not getting to travel and see family members and all that kind of stuff. So for this year, it's been really tough for them, and yet we've still got to have a season of football and watch our favorite teams and our favorite players, and we're still going to have playoffs. So I just want to give a huge shout out to all the players who have sucked it up. I know me personally, having to wear a mask for 8-9 hours at work every day, it sucks. It's not fun, guys. And even though these players are getting paid millions of dollars to do it, it still sucks nonetheless. So just a huge shout out to them being able to give us a season despite COVID and everything we've gone through this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great point. Obviously, I work as well. You have to wear these things, potentially 7, 8, 9 hours. And, oftentimes, you're moving heavy crap, you're doing manual labor, you're going outside where it can get very hot. It can be pretty miserable wearing those things. So, big shout out to everyone who has to deal with that, especially including the, professional athletes. Obviously, they have it a lot more fortunate than everyone else. But this year has been hard on everybody. And, I think I speak for everyone when I say, let's I'm just ready for this to go away. Let's get this vaccine out here. If people don't want to get it, fine, but let's get it out there at least. People can get it, and so everyone can stop wearing their mask, can stop worrying about if they're going to get it or not, and let's have a little bit of a return to normalcy, and hopefully the quality of sports keeps up because the past few months, I got to say I'm very surprised with how excellent the quality has been from college football, from the NFL. The NHL playoffs were fantastic. I think the NBA playoffs and the MLB as well were very good. And obviously, sport a lot of people don't watch, but I've been keeping up with the Premier League as well. Over in England has been fantastic as well. Um, it's been a weird sports world, but I think it's been a great sports world.
Yeah, most definitely. And finding ways to, persevere despite the circumstances and still get to watch and for the athletes play a sport that we all love. Um, with that said, Noah, I believe you as well. I have to work tomorrow, unfortunately, first thing in the morning. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Real quickly, John, and this is, really exciting for me personally. John Wall scored 22 in his Houston Rockets debut following that 2-year injury layoff. And I know for him and me personally, a little bit relatable overcoming injury. It's such a phenomenal feeling. Because when you're going through it in the moment and the injury, it kind of feels like, you're the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and you don't know, one, are you going to recover fully, and two, are you ever going to be back to what it used to be? So, absolutely phenomenal by him. Really happy, even though he isn't a Washington Wizard. I'm still going to root really hard for him. So that's really cool to see. But yeah, I'm really excited to be back here. Like I said, it feels like it's been weeks, even though we just had that 1 week off. But I feel like we had a really fun show tonight, Noah. I'm going to try like hell to stay up and watch the rest of this game and not pass out, even though I have to be up early. Clemson did just score, so now it's only 35-21. They're clawing their way back into it potentially, should they get another stop and another score. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for joining in. Thank you for being here with me, Noah. I had a really good time tonight.
Yeah, no problem, man. Me as well. I absolutely loved it as usual. Big shout out to our regulars here, like David and Mike, John. Um, like I said, pretty much every show when we end it, the fans make it what it is. And obviously we're still pretty small right now, but we're not going anywhere. We're gonna keep building this thing on the sports box. Hopefully we can help them grow as well, and they can help us grow in return. And hey man, it's mutual, David, and all the fans. Just absolutely fantastic. Especially talking sports is fun, but with my man Garth and the fans, it's just fantastic. And in a year 2020 where everything went wrong, this has been a bright spot for me, and I'm sure you agree as well. And, hopefully in this new year, things can start to get better. And, we're just going to keep on chugging along. So very happy.
Yeah, most definitely. And hopefully this year coming, not only for this, but everything in general can be, even better and really exciting and promising. I really hope that for us, Noah, this year that our show just continues to grow. We love having you guys here. We love doing this. And as we say pretty much every week, it's our goal just to keep getting bigger and better and, trying to be better and put on a better show for you guys. But yeah, and before I forget it, because I feel like I have the past few times we've been on, real quickly, I'm not going to put up the ad or anything like that, but I just want to give a shout out to Crowd Play. They actually, I haven't been on Twitter tonight to check, but I noticed last time we were live, Noah, they did like and actually share our show on Twitter. So that's really awesome. You guys can check them out on the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store. Use code THEBOX for 10% off when you sign up. And it's just, a really fun app to play while you sit down and watch games and, be even more involved with the game and potentially win some prizes or even money. So, make sure you guys check them out, give it a download. Like I said, use code THEBOX. And thank you guys for all joining tonight. Thank you for being here, Noah. As always, we'll be back next Friday night, 9:00 sharp, I say in quotations, because sometimes things come up and, either me or Noah can be delayed by a few minutes, but, we always send out that link, we share it. So, just be looking forward to us. And we hope that next week, we'll be talking, some really good playoff matchups.
Absolutely, man. And, good thing we're getting off because my voice is going, but I just want to say, agree with everything you said. And, to everyone who's watching, have a great night. It's going to be a great week of sports and a great weekend. And, we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for watching the Sports Box. Follow us on Facebook at Sports Box Show, Twitter at Sports Box Show, Instagram at The Sports Box Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our friends at Crowd Play. Download the free Crowd Play app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 points. See you next time.